According to recent media coverage, there is a new existential threat facing our species. Some of the richest and most recognizable names in tech have expressed their concern, including Elon Musk, Sam Altman, Ray Kurzweil, and Geoffrey Hinton. So what is this risk that we face? Well, it's not war, poverty, or climate change. It's artificial general intelligence, or also known as AGI. This is a very different type of AI to the sorts of narrow AI we have on our phones. This fear centers on a future machine intelligence so infinitely greater than our own, so much more capable, that it will overthrow the human race. Now, the terms that are associated with this fear are existential risk. Some people call it the singularity. Also, it's called ideas like AI alignment. But a lot of people just call it AI doomers. So, this is the new moment for AGI, thinking about future threats. For me, though, what I would like to discuss today is what is really happening in the background. And this here is the notable paradox of the field. Because the people who are most responsible for building and implementing AI are in fact the ones issuing the largest threats. So the people who are most alarmed are the very architects of artificial intelligence today. And by sustaining this paradox, they are reaping unprecedented financial investment and political power. In short, the tech billionaire class are arguing that their very own products could one day rise up and destroy humanity. And who do you think they say are the people who can save us? Can you guess? Yes, it's them. So I'd like to suggest that this is one of the most self-serving and dangerous ideologies of our time. Some people in the AI field truly believe that they are creating superhuman sentience, a new divine power, with the only question being whether it will be a benevolent God or a wrathful God. In fact, during the recent drama at OpenAI, when the CEO, Sam Altman, was fired and then rehired, the media reported on it like a split in the church, with the board fighting over whether this next generation of AI would be altruistic or apocalyptic. Silicon Valley is sounding a little more like a cult than an industry. But it's no surprise that the existential risk ideology is so contagious. It connects with a powerful, ancient fear in our collective consciousness. The narrative of creating a technology that brings about our own demise can be traced all the way back to Prometheus in ancient Greece, Frankenstein in the early 1800s, and more contemporary narratives like The Terminator and The Matrix. So millennia of human myth-making has primed us to be seduced by such stories. The fear of an overwhelming new predator connects with our most primal brain functions. But in the shadow of this imagined risk, a slowly unfolding reality is being lost, the way that our actually existing AI is reshaping our world. Our current AI technologies are very different from futuristic AGI in the following ways. Current AI is already widening the landscape of economic inequality, altering labor dynamics, and accelerating the climate crisis. We are told to fear these hypothetical dangers, which is blinding us to the profound impact that actually existing AI is having in the here and now. So today, I want to look beyond the sensationalism of AGI to map out the material implications of the AI around us. The new industrial wave of massively scaled, data extractive, and resource-intensive AI has far-reaching implications for human civilization. Today, I want to address three: our ecologies, our economies, and our elections. Because the real threat is that the systems built by billionaires today will tilt the balance away from democratic process toward unchecked global power. But first, let me give you some context about who I am. For over a decade, I have been researching artificial intelligence, but with a particular focus on the social, political, and ecological effects. As we know, AI systems are influencing billions of people every day, recommending who gets a job, who gets bail, directing our news feeds, police resources, and even autonomous weapons. How AI interprets the world is not just a technical issue. It has become the fundamental force in human subjectivity, part of how we understand ourselves, each other, and the world around us. But now we have generative AI, which in the space of just 12 months has transformed global information flows. Honestly, the whiplash of the last year is like nothing I've ever seen. We've had a new AI model coming out every month, and each one of them upends how human labor is valued. I'd argue that we're shifting where humans fit in a cognitive supply chain. Now, you've probably heard of tools like ChatGPT, Bard, and Midjourney that offer to write for you, to make images for you, and even offer you personal advice. Now, these capabilities were previously understood to be quintessential human, but now we outsource them. Sometimes we outsource the act of decision-making itself. Now, this displacement of human cognition and creativity comes at a cost, as we'll see today. But many of these costs are hidden. Mapping out how artificial intelligence is made, and I mean this in the fullest sense of the word, is the topic of my book, Atlas of AI, or Atlas de la Inteligencia Artificial, as it is translated here in Chile. Over 5 years, I went on field trips around the world to see the industrial scale extraction of data, labor, and natural resources that feed contemporary AI. Now, my aim in making this atlas was to trace a global political economy of AI and to connect different landscapes around the world that are often hard to find or kept intentionally invisible. So I'm going to share with you some of my findings from those journeys, because as an AI researcher, this experience of writing this book changed my perspective. It opened my eyes to the planetary impacts of these technologies, and ultimately how little time we have to get this right. But first, we need to bring the myths of AI back down to earth, and I mean that quite literally, to see the actual threats we face. So let's begin with number 1, the environmental harms of AI. Now, the full environmental consequences of AI is still one of the least studied domains, but we can already see the effects of large-scale computation in our atmosphere, in the water table, and in the Earth's crust. At this moment, there is a global frenzy for critical minerals. One of the field sites that I visited for my book is a small town called Silver Peak in a big desert of Nevada. Now, during the Cold War rush of strategic minerals in the 1950s, Silver Peak was discovered to be on the edge of a massive underground lake of lithium. It is now the only operating lithium mine in the US, run by the American company Albemarle. Now, this makes Silver Peak a site of intense interest to Elon Musk and other tech tycoons for one reason: rechargeable batteries. Now, lithium is also known as grey gold. Lithium undergirds the entire internet, every device and platform that you can think of. Now, smartphone batteries, for example, use about 7 grams of lithium. But each Tesla Model S car, which you've probably seen, need about 62 kilograms of lithium for its battery pack. That is why Tesla is now the company that uses half of the world's total store of lithium. Now, all of these batteries have a limited lifespan, they're very hard to recycle, and are generally thrown away as waste. But as many people in this room know, the richest site of lithium in the world is right here in Chile, with somewhere between 9 to 10 million metric tons spread across the salt flats. This means Chile is at the heart of a geopolitical mineral battle. Now, in Chile, you have two large privately owned mines. One is run by the Chilean firm SQM, which is nearly a quarter Chinese-owned, and the other is Albemarle, the same company that mines Nevada. Now, significantly, President Boric announced a national lithium strategy in 2023 that gives the government a controlling stake in the production of lithium, so that the profits of the extraction could be spent here in Chile. Now, this is an important step, but it raises complex questions with different stakeholders, depending on which timescale you use. And there are multiple timelines to consider with lithium mining, as this mineral is both essential and disappearing fast. A 2020 study by the University of Augsburg in Germany modeled the known reserves of lithium and found that even with best practices and lots of recycling, lithium may be depleted shortly after 2100. Without best practices, we could have shortages as soon as 2040. Now, researchers around the world are looking for a substitute for lithium, but a practical alternative is yet to be found. This problem is true of almost all critical minerals in the AI supply chain. Minerals that took billions of years to form in the Earth's crust are being stripped out at an astonishing rate. From the perspective of deep time, we are extracting Earth's history to serve a split second of technological convenience. And what responsibilities do we have to the indigenous populations who live on these lands and to the generations to come when all of this lithium is stripped away? Next, let's turn to carbon emissions. Because if minerals are the backbone of AI, energy is its lifeblood. And in just the past 5 years, we've seen a huge increase in computational demands because of generative AI, as tech companies are racing to build giant hyperscale data centers. Now, ChatGPT, Bard, and other AI chatbots are consuming energy faster than renewable energy can supply it. Each generative AI interaction that you might have when you have a discussion with GPT is estimated to use more than 10 times the energy of a traditional web search. Now, the University of Washington has just published a study that indicates that ChatGPT uses the energy equivalent of 33,000 households in the US per day. And again, in Nature, we saw a prediction that total energy demand of our computational infrastructure could reach 20% of global electrical demand by 2030. Now, that is up from 1.5% today. I mean, this is astronomical. And according to some models, generative AI will soon be using as much energy as entire nation states. But you'll notice something. All of the figures that I'm mentioning are estimates. And why? Well, because the full carbon footprint of generative AI models are kept as closely guarded corporate secrets. Just as the traditional mining industry remains profitable because it does not pay for its wider costs to the ecologies and to people, so the AI economy can obscure its externalities and planetary effects. But I'll tell you this, AI insiders know that generative AI is enormously energy hungry and getting more so. In a paper by Facebook AI researchers, they admit this, and I'll quote, "The endless pursuit of higher model quality has led to the exponential scaling of AI with significant energy and environmental footprint implications." What do they call this? They say it's the elephant in the room. And I agree. The issue is that the AI industry does not want to talk about its carbon-emitting elephant. Instead, it's focused on the fictional apex predator of superintelligent AGI. Now, the last critical resource I'll mention is water. And I'm glad to see that the senators this morning mentioned the growing problem of drought. Because new generative AI systems require enormous amounts of fresh water to cool their heat-producing GPUs. Now, a recent study made a rough calculation that every exchange with ChatGPT, say 25 or 50 responses, you ask questions, it replies, that is the equivalent of pouring half a litre of fresh water onto the ground. And as Google and Microsoft were scaling their generative AI systems, both companies reported major spikes in their water usage, 20% and 34% respectively. And that's an increase in just 1 year. I think this is a revealing insight of the pressures to come, because now cities that are located near data centers are worried about the impact on their residential water supply. For example, in West Des Moines, Iowa, a giant hyperscale data center was built to serve GPT-4, OpenAI's most advanced model. Now, during peak times in summer, the custom-built facility of 10,000 GPUs draws at least 6% of all of the water in the district, which of course also supplies the residents. So these are the current known impacts of generative AI. It is draining the planet of water, energy, and minerals at a superlinear rate. And I would suggest this is the real existential risk of AI. But something can be done to lessen these problems, because AI systems can be more energy efficient, and sustainability can be prioritized. Researchers around the world are working on these issues, but to date, a different set of priorities has driven industrial production. The AI arms race, as it's called, to be first to market, has given precedence to speed over sustainability. Now, the philosophers Michael Hart and Antonio Negri once described the information economy as being premised on a dual operation of extraction and abstraction. In other words, industries abstract away all of these material conditions like minerals and water while extracting ever more information and natural resources. But I want to add to this today. What we are seeing now with the AI industry is a three-part process: abstraction, extraction, and distraction. Because we are being distracted by myths and mysticism, by the novelty of AI chatbots and AI selfies, while out of sight, the real crisis is growing. The rapacious drawdown of resources that are already in such short supply on the planet. Here I'll quote the philosopher Timothy Morton. He describes the planetary climate as a hyper-object, a massively distributed process of such vast temporal and spatial scale that it can overwhelm our thinking and overwhelm our policies. The full life cycle of artificial intelligence is a hyper-object too. It's hard to see, even as it's becoming a central tool in our lives. And this, I would like to suggest, is why we are so susceptible to believing AI creators when they say that they might build a monster that will destroy us all. Because the environmental reality is dispersed and it's slower moving, while a primal fear feels immediate. It's right in front of you. So people are drawn to the old myths and the new toys. So now let's turn to the economic risks, and in particular, the labor market disruption. Now in 2023, OpenAI predicted that 80% of the US workforce would see their tasks affected by generative AI. Goldman Sachs predicted that AI would eventually replace 300 million full-time jobs. But I'll be honest with you, these numbers, they feel a little bit like guesswork. But we are seeing some early signs. Google has announced it will lay off approximately 30,000 people, reportedly due to generative AI replacing their duties. Economists are still debating how far the labour impacts will go, and the jury is out. But programmers, journalists, illustrators, lawyers, and medical workers are all concerned that their work is vulnerable to automation. But with all of this focus on cognitive labour markets, less attention is given to the rise of the data underclass, or what Trebor Scholz calls the data precariat. Now, estimates vary on how many people do crowd work and other forms of AI platform labour, but a recent Google paper cited millions, with the possibility to grow even larger. Now, in 2022, Chile became one of the first countries to pass a law to regulate work on digital platforms. And this law gives platform workers like drivers and delivery workers the right to a minimum wage, as well as social security and collective bargaining. Now, while this is impressive progress, very much of this hangs on whether workers are classified as independent or dependent, which is largely up to the employers. And this new law does not grant platform workers the right to strike. So even with this forward-thinking law in Chile, the power imbalance between platforms and workers is still an ongoing problem. But now there's a whole new domain of data labour. It's called reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF for short. Now, RLHF labourers work on generative AI, but they go beyond just annotating data. They actually interact with models to give human feedback and direction. Now, this is done, of course, to optimize outputs and reduce harmful content. But being the human interface for that work can be deadening, or worse, traumatizing. Many of these jobs, of course, are outsourced to the global south. And in the case of OpenAI, it was Kenyan workers who were paid less than $2 an hour to remove toxic results like graphic accounts of murder, suicide, and torture. In Chile, the labour conditions on digital platforms were assessed by Oxford University's Fair Work programme in 2021, and it received a score of just 2 out of 10. What that means is that digital platforms are failing to meet basic standards of decent work. Now, the labour activist Astra Taylor calls this faux-tomation, or fake automation. That is, humans are doing the work of propping up machines. And this is why AI is actually neither artificial nor intelligent. It is both a technology with an enormous material footprint and one that also hides the human intelligence that it relies on to shore up the system. But the data labour supply chain, just like AI's environmental harms, is hard to map, and that's by design. Companies outsource this work and demand strict confidentiality. As I encountered in my research over and over again, data workers are often forbidden from talking about their jobs, even with their families. So this is the future of the growing underclass of the data precariat. They are muzzled from speaking, prevented from striking, and marginalized from benefiting from the skyrocketing profits of the AI sector that they sustain. So this brings me to the third and final risk of AI, our elections. In this coming year, half of the world's population will go to the polls. That's around 70 countries, with a total of more than 3.7 billion inhabitants, will elect new leaders, including the United States, India, Mexico, South Africa, Taiwan, Russia, and Indonesia. Many of these countries are already geopolitical flashpoints, from, of course, Russia-Ukraine war to the tensions around Taiwan. But at this pivotal moment in world electoral history, a chaotic new force has emerged. Generative AI tools can produce content instantly that is completely believable, undermining our ability to tell real from fake, true from false. So that makes us vulnerable to new forms of intellectual and emotional manipulation, as AI-targeted information tells us exactly what we want to hear. And that information might be completely different for you compared to your neighbor or your colleagues or even your families. So this global crisis of representation challenges our existing philosophical understandings of truth and even the idea of a shared consensus reality. When voters can't tell if something is what it seems, democracy itself faces an epistemic collapse. Now, at this point, we've all been through election cycles with social media, and we've seen the impact that it has had on our democratic process. But in many ways, social media was just a distribution pipeline. What is coming is much, much bigger. Let me suggest one way that this is going to be different. This year, the people building generative AI systems also control the platforms that distribute those AI outputs. For example, Elon Musk is building his own AI chatbot, and he owns Twitter. And of course, Google has Bard, but it also has Search and Gmail. Now, before this point, algorithmic promotion of fake news and misinformation was always a problem on social media. But those platforms didn't make the content themselves. Now the people who own the means of AI production also own the distribution pipelines. And Elon Musk is a really good example of why this is a problem. Because after he acquired Twitter, he upended its entire verification system, disbanded the trust and safety teams, and welcomed back people onto the platform who had been banned for sharing violent threats and conspiracy theories. Well, now he's making an AI chatbot called Grok that could create even more misinformation and abuse. But it also generates a lot of clicks and attention, which drives monetization. So whose interests do you think Elon Musk will protect? For me, this underscores the troubling reality. The measures that we have to combat misinformation, which are essential for democratic integrity, are increasingly subject to the whims of billionaires whose systems are generating the very content that they are expected to eradicate. The concentration of so much decision-making power into the hands of so few, especially on platforms that are essential for public communication and elections, well, this goes beyond the usual threats of deep fakes and false claims, because it places enormous control over the flow and regulation of information with those who have a financial benefit to promote generative AI. So their priorities, shall we say, are not aligned with the public interest. In other words, the foxes are guarding the henhouse. So this is why governments are more important than ever. But right now, many governments feel under-equipped to challenge this transfer of power to AI companies. For example, while the EU passed the AI Act in 2023, in the US, the AI regulatory environment is very weak and anemic, with companies just voluntarily agreeing to self-regulate. And this is why we need wider international coalitions that can respond at scale. So, to bring things to a conclusion, the structures of power and capital in the global north have been very well served by this recent mystification of AGI. It has deferred accountability and distracted us from the serious risks that AI already poses to people and the planet. This triad that we've discussed today of environmental, economic, and electoral harms. But on a positive note, we are not locked in to the current trajectory, because ultimately, these issues are not technological. They are political. And our hope lies with more public participation, information, and oversight into the way that AI is being super-scaled across our societies and affecting our democracies. Right now, The major decisions about the design and deployment of AI are made by a tiny number of technology companies, mostly in the US and China. This has warped global power and rendered the rest of the world into client states, treated like open-cut mines to extract ever more data, labor, energy, and minerals, but without giving any decision-making power about how those AI systems will work or whose interests they will serve. I think this opens up an enormous public policy opportunity. Chile has already shown great leadership with policies for lithium and platform labor. Now is the moment to develop strong AI regulation. What we need is a regulatory approach that monitors this full stack consequences of AI across these supply chains of labor, data, natural resources, but also requires transparency and accountability across the full life cycle of AI. Now, this is actually a gap in current regulatory approaches, including in the EU's AI Act, because traditionally, labor and resources are extracted elsewhere than the EU. Chile has a powerful position in terms of lithium and labor, and therefore has a unique possibility to shape AI governance. But actually, the problems we face also go beyond any individual nation state. This means that there is a key role for multilateral coalitions outside the tech duopoly of the United States and China. That means Latin America, Africa, and the Trans-Pacific. Large-scale efforts like this absolutely can be complex, but they can also offer us a vital alternative vision. Now, not the vision dictated by the fever dreams of billionaires who claim that they're building either a godhead or a demon that only they can control, but a vision for a different kind of AI landscape that is both more equitable and more sustainable. Thank you.